I just turned 81. All my friends keep saying, Mary, when are you going to retire? I said, I don't understand that word because I feel alive. I'm not known for keeping my mouth shut. You know that well.
Whoever's going to be in front of you is going to get a good dose of Mary.
People have lost their passion, and they don't know how to get it back. And it's not through Viagra. There's nothing you can share that would make me not accept you. Trauma is too much, too soon, too little, too late, not enough. It's okay to grieve. It's not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that I have loved well.
Yeah.
I don't have to fix anybody because I can't, but I can be a catalyst.
We're never just changing one heart.
No.
But if you're impacting the person in front of you, that's going to ripple 10x every time.
You're a mentor to me in legacy.
Yours is built. You know why? Because I'm not done yet.
They really should lock me up for some of the things I say to clients.
I don't even know if we can tell them. Can we?
Probably can.
We've been taught everything except how to be human. I'm Miles Adcox, and this podcast turns raw experience into practical wisdom. So if you're ready to stop performing your life and start participating in it, you're in the right place. This is Human School. There are many people in the psychology field who study the maps of human suffering. And then there are people like today's guests who have spent over 50 years actually walking the terrain. If you look at the landscape of how we treat trauma, disordered eating, addictions, depression, anxiety, couples work, etc., you will find her fingerprints everywhere. She is a pioneer in the field of mental health, but she's never been someone who hides behind a clipboard or clinical degrees. She spent her life in the trenches, from quiet therapy rooms to creating and running treatment programs to the unimaginable recovery work in places like Rwanda and Sudan. Mary has this rare holy grit. She has seen the hardest parts of the human experience and never blinks. She stays in the room when things get uncomfortable, and she teaches the rest of us to do the same. She has spent 5 decades giving parts of her life away so others could find theirs. To many of us in this work, she is more than a mentor. She's a North Star. She's taught me more than words could ever capture. And she's shown a generation of therapists what it looks like to lead with heart that is both fierce and incredibly compassionate. It is a true honor to have a legend of this field and a dear, dear friend of mine, one of my favorite people, on the show today. I'm grateful to sit down with her today. Please welcome Mary Bellofatto.
Thank you, Miles. It's such a pleasure to be here.
That was a tough one to write because it's so personal to me. I think there are a lot of, when deciding to embark on this journey of Human School, which you've been one of the great encouragers of me to step into this space and into this idea and into this platform. I've been workshopping it with you for years in a lot of settings. I wanted, obviously, to talk to some influential people who are doing great things with their life, but I also wanted to introduce people outside of our field to brilliant people that they may not know. And you were obviously at the top of that list. I've got a few others I can't wait to talk to. But you're a little different because I have a lot of mentors and a lot of relationships and a lot of colleagues in this field who I deeply respect. You're one of them. But then in this case, you've also been a dear friend. And so I feel like we could probably sit and talk about friendship for 2 hours. But that'd be selfish on my part, as much as I love catching up with you. Because I want people to understand how you think. I want them to understand the impact that your heart has had on our space, but around the world. So maybe we'll do a little bit of both, but we'll start with, how are you, Mary B?
I am excellent. I woke up this morning excited.
Yeah?
And that, to me, is the beginning of a great day. Because I know that what's ahead of me is going to be challenging, fun, because I'm going to bring fun into it. And it's also so rewarding. I'm awed when I watch people change. It is something that, if you've never witnessed miracles, I get to do it in my work. And I can't imagine retiring.
Wow. Well, the currency of miracles is a paycheck that until you've received it, it's hard to explain.
Yes.
It's hard to explain. But I thought you just did a beautiful job. And there are many days I wake up with your disposition, excited, anticipatory, knowing I'm moving into something hard, but there's a real good chance I might see a miracle. And then there's other days the weight of the profession gets on my shoulders, and I can come into it with excitement and a little bit of dread. And you have a unique way, and I'm assuming a lot of that just comes with well-earned experience of bringing a rested presence, a positive mindset into what many might consider a pretty tough gig. And you're basically going to help people unpack some of the worst parts of their story. And I sit across from you, and you have emotion just thinking about that process. Yeah. Where does that come from?
Well, I know that I can't change anybody. But my relationship with them is, if you would, it's an anchor. That if I can hold space for someone to do their work, wherever that is, and to hear the hard stories, and to just be there, and to really see them, because that's all any of us want. Can you really see me? And when I'm listening to all the good things you say about me, I feel seen by you, but I always have. Whether they're words or not, we can see another soul, another human being's pain, suffering, joy, excitement. It's all in the same package. And sometimes we get so focused on the negative that we cannot help people see, hey, there's another whole part of you here. Wouldn't you like to experience this? Wouldn't you like to open this door and welcome this part of you home? And to me, just being able to know that I don't have to fix anybody, because I can't. I didn't cause it. I can't fix it. But I can be a catalyst. And I have a pre-med background, so I learned that the word catalyst means it is something that enters into an equation and changes it, but it itself is not changed.
Wow.
So it doesn't mean that I'm not changed, but I can keep who I am, hold steady with that, and enter into whatever is there, whether it's fun, whether it's painful, wherever it's sad, the losses, the grief, and witness. To be a witness, to hold space for someone's story is the most honoring thing we can do. No matter what the situation. I just had my 91-year-old brother visiting me for 2 weeks from Maine, and he's getting dementia. But he tells the most incredible stories, and I've heard every one of them. But this time when he would tell the story, he'd say, "Sis, have you heard this one?" I'll say, "Tell it to me again, Wilson." Oh. So just being able to hear people's stories and connecting, because relationships are what heal us. We are wounded in our relationships, but I tell people that's only half the equation. We are healed in our relationships with others. And I believe that we can all be healing agents. No matter whether you're a therapist or not, we all have the ability to connect to human beings. And that's what our world is seeking right now. Man, it's like, is anybody out there? Does anybody see me? Does anybody care? And a few weeks ago, I was sitting in the Fort Myers airport, flying to Nashville to Onsite, and I watched a cleaning lady empty the trash, and I thought, I wonder if anybody ever connects to her. It's just an unseen job, pulling out the trash cans. So I just sat there gazing at her, and directly she looked up, and I smiled at her, and I said, "Thank you." And her smile, I mean, you would have thought I'd given her $1 million. Didn't think anything about it. For a few weeks later, I was in the same airport one morning running to my gate, and I see this cart coming, and this lady is waving at me. It was her. Oh. And what I share from that story, when we see, we can be seen. Such a simple, when we really see. And she felt that connection from my glance. And I waved at her. I didn't have time to stop and have a conversation. And I said, thank you on the way by. But for a moment, we saw each other. No words.
And there's something in a wave. There's an endearing wave, or like a Forrest Gump wave. Just the big, enthusiastic, where you can tell somebody's really seeing or talking into you, or just genuinely excited about your presence.
Yeah.
You, in the beginning there, well, by the way, we pretty much could call it a wrap here. You just got some wisdom. That could be a TED Talk. I'm like, where do we go from here? That's what you do. It takes me 2 hours to say something, and you say it all in about 2 minutes. That was really well said and beautiful. In the very beginning, you were talking about why you do what you do a little bit, and right when you got to the point of saying, I just could never see myself retiring, and you had some emotion in your eyes, some tears in your eyes, and so I'll borrow a page out of your playbook, not quite as timed as brilliantly as you time it, because I should have got there before the next conversation, but I want to go back to it because I think it was important, and just to say, tell me more about what was coming up there.
Well, I think I feel so connected and so in tune with what I'm created to do. And so few people in their whole lifetime get to do what they really love. I meet a lot of people hate their jobs, they don't like their bosses, they don't feel fulfilled. And I get to do all of that. And I just turned 81, and I keep thinking, I've got to slow down, I've got to quit at some point. In fact, all my friends keep saying, Mary, when are you going to retire? I said, I don't understand that word. I'm not even talking about it. I said, I'm going to go as long as I feel the fuel and the energy and the excitement, because I feel alive. And who doesn't want to feel alive?
So if those tears were talking, it would generally be a deep passion.
Yes.
For life and for what you get to do as a vocation.
And knowing that it is what I was designed to do. That's the other piece. Because I've had a lot of jobs over the years. I've had 2 careers. But this one is what I was designed to do.
What was the first one?
I was in the medical field. And spent about 10 years doing that. And everywhere I'd go, people would start pouring their stories out to me. And I used to say, do I have a sign on my back that says I'm a therapist? And I would work in labs and hospitals, and doctors and nurses would start telling me their problems with the staff. And I'm thinking, I'm just here to teach you how to run this automated machine to do blood work. I'm not here to be your therapist. But that's when I said, you know what? I missed it. I'm going to go back to school and become a therapist. No regrets.
Well, one of the things I respect about you and like about you, and I get the biggest kick out of what story you're going to tell when I see you, because there are the stories that are on the main stage, what we've gotten to do together professionally for, many, many years now, collaborated on hundreds of clients and guests, and we constantly have multiple people we're working together on. And it's been a beautiful journey, but it's not those stories usually that I hear first. We have a formal way of sitting down and processing and debriefing and talking about the cases that we work together on. But it's usually when you show up, you're bringing a story like the airport story, or the Uber driver, or the server at the restaurant. I've never seen anybody that everywhere you go. So it's still happening, by the way. 51 years in our field, incredible. After that 10-year run in the medical field, when everyone was coming to you. And I think let me just ask you, I've got a hunch on why you are that human, and why you see so deeply into humanity that wherever you are, you want to bring yourself. And the tools aren't some hidden backpack that you pull out and use in a professional setting and tuck away when you go home. It's really integrated, which that's part of the reason that I was inspired to get into our field. Like a lot of people, we have our own story. And many of us that get into mental health and psychology, we're kind of chasing something. In my case, I was looking for something that was missing in myself, and I couldn't quite find it. And I thought, if there's anybody that probably has it figured out, it's the people that help people figure things out. And I bet if I go be a part of whatever they're doing, then maybe I'll figure out more about my story. It'll make more sense. And I love to help people, so it's kind of a double win. But there's so many people I've seen in our field over the years that I look at what they've done, and I could give them a well-deserved round of applause for putting their heart out there and putting their lives in the trenches for helping people grow, change, and heal through significant adversity. And if I look at who they are and how they're showing up in the world after 20, 30, 40, 50 years of doing this work, I think, boy, it looks like it kind of came at a pretty significant cost. And in some ways, there's sharp edges and hard corners, and it's part of the human condition. We've all got them. But what I've always admired and looked up to in you is the integrated way in which you carry yourself and your profession. It's like you can't separate it. Wherever you go, there you are. And that whoever's going to be in front of you is going to be a beneficiary, or they might resist. But either way, they're going to get a good dose of Mary.
That's not always welcomed.
Yeah, tell me about that. I went back to one story where I had sent you to, because we've been running this entertainment division for the last 5 years and carved out a specialty niche. So I've got a lot of relationships in the space and have built a lot of experience and expertise in working with high-performing folks that have big platforms and the pressure that comes with that. It's a unique group. And you came along the ride with me. We did my first calls. I really need your clinical acumen on this. Are you willing to commit some time? And boy, have you. You've been all over the country and out of the country working with people. And one of the gigs was in L.A., and you were Ubering somewhere. Would you mind finishing? Do you remember that story?
Yes. I think it's part of California's culture. But I ordered an Uber because the clients I were working with live 2 or 3 miles away from my hotel. And this young man shows up, and he's got a hood on, so I can't see him. I get in the car, and I said, "Good morning, Soul Journey." And he said, "Yeah, that was awesome." I said, "I just said good morning, Soul Journer." I said, "You're in the same journey as I'm on. We're all on a journey." And he said, "Oh, I'm really wanting to be seen. He said, I'm working on a podcast, and I really want people to see me." And I said, "No, you don't." And he stops the Uber, and he turns around and looks at me, and I said, "I can't even see your face. You got a hood on." So he takes one hood off. He had another one on. And I said, "I still can't see you." And he pulls the second hood off, and I said, "There you are. I see you." Well, he started talking. He did not want me to get out of that car when 2 or 3 miles down the road. And the funny thing was, when we drove up to the client's home, the husband was outside doing something, and he said, "I've never seen a person get out of an Uber and the driver jumps out to get a hug from you." And he said, the funny thing was, that was the first day. The second day, I had another Uber driver, and he got in the car, and the car was really messy. And I just said to him, "Are you okay?" And he looked at me and he said, "No." He said, "I'm homeless." He said, "I've been sleeping in my car." And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I said, "Is there a recommendation I might make for you to connect with someone in the community?" He said, "No, I'm getting my feet under me." And I said, "Well, I'm going to be praying for you that you find the right connections, the right job," because the Uber was just helping him get by. So the husband is out when I drive up the second day washing his car. The Uber driver jumps out again and gives me a big hug, and he said, "Not only did you get hugged the first day," he said, "what is it you're doing with the Uber drivers?" I said, "I'm just listening. Just hearing their story." And I said to that young man, I said, "I'm going to be praying that life has a turnaround for you." And he says, "Life's been really hard for me." And I said, I hear that. But I said, "You did a great job today. Thank you." So that's my Uber story.
There's there's 100 more, not Uber related, but there's 100 more beautiful stories I've heard. That's one of my favorite things, is like, what's Mary into now? What's she going to tell me now? Where's she been and who's she connected with? But I think about when I get in an Uber, and I usually will take Ubers out of necessity initially if it was a big urban area where I didn't have a car for a ride. And then I started being like, ooh, I can book an Uber and it can be a mobile office. So I can work. And so then my head flipped, and it was like every time I get in an Uber solo, bam, I finally get time to jump into work. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But it does make me wonder, what am I missing by taking every opportunity to jump back into my technology to try to catch up on what? When there's an opportunity, which I think you give us great examples of, to be a little bit more analog in a digital world and slow down and engage with the people around you. Because I would imagine obviously you give benefit to people that you connected with in that environment, but I'm sure for you there's probably reciprocal benefit as well.
Yeah, because the look on someone's face when you see them is profound. Because people hide in so many ways. Technology is just one of them. They hide in isolation. They hide behind work. They hide behind their titles. And when you can ignore all that and just go to the very soul. And I believe that if we allow ourselves and people would take down the walls, you can feel people. You can feel when they're depressed, they're anxious, upset, because we all have an energy that we emit, and other people feel our energy. But we often don't comment on it. We don't say anything. And sometimes when I feel that around people, I will say something. In fact, not long ago, I was going to Publix on a Saturday morning, and I live in Naples, Florida, and so many tourists during the winter months, and I was in a hurry and just kind of being judgmental, like, why don't all these tourists shop during the week so people who work can get down the aisle? And I pushed my cart down the aisle and turned the corner, and all of a sudden I felt it. It was like heavy, and I thought, what am I feeling? And I went back. There was this little lady standing in front of the coffee, little elderly lady, and I looked at her and tears were coming down her cheeks, and I said, ma'am, can I help you? Are you okay? And she said, my husband died last week, and she said, he always bought the coffee. She said, I don't know what kind to buy. And I said, well, what do you like? Do you like light coffee, dark coffee? And I helped her find a coffee, and I said, we have here in town a local grief group, and I'd love to recommend that to you, because I said, what you're feeling is normal. I said, it's hard when you've lost a spouse, you've lived that many years together. And that's the kind of thing I think all of us can feel, but we don't allow ourselves to. We're in such a hurry. And my prayer always is, God, don't let me get in such a hurry that I miss the connections that you have for me, because those might be the really, really important ones. It's not up to me to judge that.
Wow. Yeah, moments like that, and I've had a few as well. Ideally, you saw her in a very vulnerable place, and you connected with her, and then you helped her. But I'm thinking tomorrow morning when I have my cup of coffee, it'll hit a little different, because I'll be thinking about the woman in the grocery store that had lost her husband and felt grief in that moment.
Yeah.
And so there are all these, that's the beautiful thing about our profession, is there are all these little nuggets and reminders that have a way of shifting us back into the present moment if you're paying attention. You mentioned hurry gets in the way of that. But I know hurry for many of us is just a medicator. It's just a way to regulate our nervous system. What do you think is in the way of us being able to see one another and us to be in a present space?
I think we don't want to see ourselves. Because if we hurry and we stay busy, and I often will ask people, what are you hurrying to, or what are you running from? What is driving you? And they'll say, oh, nothing. And I'll say, no, stop and think about that. What is it Is there a voice back there that says, I've got to do this, I've got to accomplish, I've got to get money, I've got to get retirement, I got to get the right job? There's some voice that is driving you, or there's something that's pulling you that maybe you desire, but maybe you could slow down and enjoy the trip while you're on the road to getting whatever it is you desire. And I find that if people can allow themselves to just be, but I think we don't want to connect with others because we don't want them to know us. Sometimes we got the walls built so high that it's like people say, oh, I'm really connected. And I'll say, no, you're not, or you wouldn't be so lonely all the time. If you're really connected and somebody really knows you, then they can accept that you're lonely. There's no judgment about that. We all get lonely. But loneliness can be cured by learning to be alone.
Ooh, say more about that.
Because most of us don't want to be alone. When we are alone, the TV's on, the technology is running, we've got earbuds in, we're watching something, we're listening to something else. It's like, let me bombard myself so I can't be with me. And then they're searching for...
Because if I'm with me, what?
I don't like me. I don't feel that I'm enough.
That's the walls you're describing, is they end up being protectors.
Yes.
Of a way for us to distract and avoid the hard parts of our stories that maybe we don't want to see or maybe feel shame about.
Yes. And we know in this field that shame is a shield that comes from grief. We need to grieve whatever happened to us that left shame. And grieving is the hardest thing we do, because most people don't want to shed tears. And they don't realize that tears of grief have a different chemical makeup than tears of joy and sadness. And they're toxic, so they need to be shed outside the body. And when I was running the treatment center and people would go home because they'd lost a grandparent or a parent, and we'd give them a time out to go home, they'd come back and say, you know, I never shed a tear. I really did well. I said, no, you didn't. You flunked every test, because those were the most precious people to you, and you wouldn't let yourself honor them by grieving. So we hold so much in that we don't want people to know that's who I really am. It's not my title. It's not this facade I put on. It's not this, I've got everything together. But this is who I am really inside.
Talk about grief a little bit, because I think you're onto something there with saying shame is the shield that we carry when we've got, I think it wasn't the way you said it, but unprocessed grief ultimately. I think generally people think of grief in a traditional way, in which you described it, very traditional too, which is when you lose someone.
Right.
But maybe expound on how grief can show up in our stories and in our life.
Well, grief for me is this body I've never had before. This is not the body I've known all my life. And you start to grieve the loss of the body that you knew. You start to grieve relationships that are no longer there. You grieve how your body changes, that it's not as strong as it used to be. So many areas that we grieve in. We grieve sometimes in the losses, the perceived losses, the lost opportunities, those things that we can't go back and undo, that we wanted to do and we waited too late. And there's so many levels of grief, but grief is how we heal. We let that go and say, yes, I'm human, I fail, my body is weak, but my spirit is strong. And when we can grieve and be honest about what is hurting us, one of the questions I like to ask people, what is it that makes your heart grieve, that just makes your heart hurt, and that you wouldn't even say to someone because they might ridicule you? And right now, our whole world is grieving as we look at even our country. so many areas that people are grieving over, and they don't allow themselves to grieve. They allow themselves to talk about it and get angry, but they won't grieve it and say, I don't have control over this. And I lost 4 siblings in 3 years, and I have 1 sibling left. And I remember thinking, I got to be tough. And one day I said, wait a minute, I don't have to be tough. I miss them. And I cry when I see pictures of them. Or recently I walked through Macy's and smelled my sister's cologne that we were very, very close. I burst out crying because smell is one of the last senses that's so tied to sometimes trauma and grief that I said, yep, sis, I do miss you. We had some great shopping adventures at Macy's, and you let go of it and move on. But grief means you have loved well. And it's okay to grieve. It's not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that I have loved well. And I get to honor myself and let this be released so I don't carry the weight of missing and honoring. And that's where I go into, how do I honor my sister? I have a ring on today that was my sister's. She loved jewelry. She loved bling. And so I honor her by wearing some of her rings.
That's gorgeous.
And I don't grieve her, I honor her.
Your sister's name?
Robbie.
Robbie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where were in the birth order? Older, younger
I'm
sister?
the last of 7. Yeah. And she was the sister just in front of me. She was 3.5 years older than mine.
Were you all the closest of all the siblings, or?
Yes, growing up. I'm now closer to my brother Wilson. But yeah, she was my close one.
And Wilson's is your last surviving sibling?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
91 years old. Pastors been a pastor for 75 years.
Wow.
Almost 75.
He's still pastoring?
But he's not pastoring, but he's still
a pastor.
He's still pastoring.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love
he's
that.
mentoring a lot of men and young men.
Right.
Yeah.
You talked about a lot there, but one of the things I wanted to circle back to was how we widen the lens around the concept of grief. And you talked about the state of the world and or our country. And I'm curious about that because I agree. I might flip it a little bit and see how you feel about this, but I almost think as a country we've stopped grieving. And when you block grief, the only way to really block grief is to try to control. And the way to try to control is to be right at all costs.
Right.
And I see people in their corners trying to control to the best of their ability to be right at all costs. And I do think there's a bubbling wave or mountain of unprocessed grief and emotions, it's nothing to do with camps or politics or the state of whatever. Right. It's just as a world, when we see this inside of our communities that we serve and curate, and the individuals that we work with and the groups that we work with, you can see that when things, especially in group dynamic, you can see that when things start to get a little polarized and people start to latch on to certain details that aren't that important. They may be 5% or 10% of what we disagree on, but suddenly it becomes the main point of the conversation at all costs. I'm wrong. You're right. I can't trust you. Therefore, I need to. You're my enemy, basically. To me, that's unprocessed emotion or unprocessed grief. I think we have a mountain of grief that is begging to have a space where we actually see each other again and can hold pain for one another and allow stuff to. And it seems to continue to build, but one of the things I remain optimistic about is now having been in the space for quite some time myself, close to 20 years, and I've had this unique vantage point of getting week by week to watch communities of people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all different belief systems. If you were to poll everybody where they stand politically, I can assure you that would be all across the board. We remove distractions, or what we in our world call medicators, anything we would use to distract ourselves or to try to give our nervous systems immediate relief, but not necessarily sustainable, anything good. We remove a lot of those. The big one is technology. And then you kind of watch what happens when humans do humans. And it is a beautiful enlightening thing to watch. But I remember when I first started doing it, I used to watch it, and you'd have this natural progression to where people would start here, and then they would feel like almost they were going backwards a little bit. We call it storming in our world. And I remember that used to scare me to death, especially as a recovering codependent trying to find my way through the field. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm running a center and I got a lot of unhappy guests. You know, this is what we got to fix this problem. This is not good counseling. And with wisdom and with time and with experience, you don't try to change that anymore. You try to create space for it.
Yes.
And you try to see it, and you try to acknowledge it. And you also don't camp out on it. You know, it's not about calling it out. It's about inviting it forward so that people have the ability to test the corners and are you still here, and do I still matter, and do you still care about me? And if they get a yes, and sometimes it doesn't take any words, then suddenly there's another part of them that comes up. And then we see them start to grieve. The parts of their self, the parts of their story, things, like we carry other people's grief. There's a significant secondary and vicarious nature to grief, to where if you watch, all you do is watch painful parts of the news feed all day long, and adversity is your primary narrative, other people's across the world. A, good for you. You probably have a compassionate heart, and you probably care about what's happening when there's tragedies happening around the world and in our backyard. But B, we're not necessarily wired to consume all that all the time without an outlet. I think you and I have figured out, and I'm still working on it, I'm a work in progress, that you can consume things like that as long as you're very methodical and strategic about recognizing up front that this stuff can't stick in me. I've got to find a natural way to offload it. I'm curious how you feel, because I think there's a lot of people scratching their head right now, probably feeling more discouraged. And the only reason I've got a sense of optimism is because I've seen the pattern and I've seen the outcome. It's like, we form and we storm, and then it gets a little bit more norm, and then all of a sudden, boom, we start to perform. And I think as a country, a coming apart, there's only one other thing that can happen. You know, one could say we could go further apart, and we might, but then there's a coming together. And I've watched the coming together week after week to the tune of 70, 80,000 people. And it's the miracles you talk about. It's like, how do all these people that have all these differences and disagree on everything that would typically say, I can't sit in a room with you if you believe that. And they walk away looking at each other, seeing each other, loving each other, believing in each other. And suddenly they have sparked confidence in the person across from them, that they can go back out in the world and be a great human being. And I think that's what we're missing. And I think those of us from a variety of fields that are out trying to figure out how you navigate the polarization, because now that I've become a little bit more public with this show, I'm getting a lot of pressure too. Just, hey, you're not speaking up loud enough on this issue, or you need to speak on this issue. And if you don't speak on this issue, and I understand where that's coming from. And I can assure you, what I'm doing is trying to take all the wisdom experience that I have gained from witnessing the human process and the chain experience for a lot of people, and I'm trying to be effective. And when I see things that are good attempts but really ineffective, I'm not going to participate in it. But I am going to try to find a way to be effective with the people in front of me, because I have seen this happen over and over again, and I'm sure you have too. We're never just changing one heart.
No.
And that's what's made me feel good about having a niche offering. You've talked to me about this for years, because we've got a niche offering Onsite, and you and I both spend a lot of time around that mission. And people sometimes, because our brand has got good credibility, we're not perfect, we make mistakes like everybody, but our brand's got good credibility. We've had good people around it for a long time. We've got a great legacy we continue to build on into the future. Because of that, people think we're a lot bigger than we are. People think Onsite's huge. They got things everywhere. And it's actually, we're small in comparison. And that's bothered me before. 10 years ago when I was a little greener as a leader, I would look to you and I would be like, I don't feel like we're growing fast enough. We need to scale. That was a measure for me. It's like, we're not making a big enough impact. But what I can say to everybody out there, that if you're impacting the person in front of you, that's going to ripple 10x every time. And I feel like right now, the world is in need of one person impacting another person. Not one person screaming at anybody that will listen to them from their platform on another platform as loud as they can about what they believe in. Honestly, 95% of the people that follow them believe exactly what they believe in anyway. So it's just like, let's just double down on how much hate we have for the people that don't believe this. I really do feel like we're at this interesting crossroads where we're being asked to put down a microscope of judgment on everything and everybody else and pick up a mirror that invites us into reconciling the pain of our own stories and to seeing ourselves so that we then in turn can see other people. There was somewhere in there I had a question, and I completely got on a soapbox, and I'm sorry. I was like,
that reminded me, Miles, a few weeks ago I was on a flight and pulled into Atlanta, and this little elderly lady was trying to get off, and everybody was hitting her with suitcases and pushing her, and you could tell she was just really timid. And I'm not known for keeping my mouth shut. You know that well. But I thought, I really don't want to get into this. And then I thought, I got to get into this. This is not okay. And I was in a middle seat close to her, and I stood up and I said, hey, guys, does kindness still work?
What a merry question. Brilliant.
I said, here's a little lady trying to get off the plane, and y'all are treating her like a suitcase. You're hitting her. You're pushing her. I said, she's holding on, and she just looked at me, and tears came in her eyes because I could tell she was scared, and didn't look like a polished traveler. She looked like she was on her first trip, and everybody just stopped for a moment, and I said, thank you, and can we open the aisle and let her out? And so they just moved back in their chairs and let her walk off the plane. But that's an example that kindness, just being kind, doesn't matter what their views are. Kindness is a human, it comes from our soul, that every human deserves kindness without judgment and without abuse.
One of my favorite things about you, I've talked about it a few times, is how you'll condense information and say it in such a human way. For somebody that spent 50 years, and there's other people I will interview that will be quote unquote clinical experts, and I'd put your degrees and credentials up against any of them because I know you got a lot of letters behind your name and a tremendous amount of hours, a lot of expertise. There's a couple of places in our space that I would say, oh yeah, Mary's one of the top experts around this particular thing. I want to get into some of those. But what I love is that somebody could hit play so far and listen to the first 30, 45 minutes of our conversation, and I don't even think I've heard any clinical jargon at all. I haven't, and I think about how different that is from interviewing another expert, subject matter expert, and I think they would be quick to share with me what they know and how others might benefit from that, which I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's good. But I just love that you go to story first and you humanize this whole thing.
The people that we work with don't understand a lot of our language. It's like the word trauma. It's become so normalized that everything becomes trauma, and people will say, oh, that's just an overused word. But when I tell people trauma is too much, too soon, too little, too late, not enough. And they say, oh, well, I have some of that. They can connect to that, but they can't connect to all the trauma language. So part of it's being brought up in Arkansas, simple.
What town?
Monticello, which was, I lived 10 miles from Monticello, which I lived out in the sticks.
What population is it, Monticello, Arkansas?
Monticello at that time may have been 2,000 people.
Small town.
Yeah.
Where's Johnny Cash from in Arkansas?
Up around, I think, Fort Smith, Arkansas.
For some reason, Monticello sounded familiar, and I wondered if that was Cash's hometown.
But common sense is a lot of people don't have a lot of common sense.
Short supply?
Yeah, it's in short supply for a lot of people.
Okay. And you think your roots in a small town provided that. Why do you think that is? Because some people would look at, and I'm the same way, I grew up in a town of 4,000, and a lot of people would look down on that, like dumb hicks, but what is it that you feel you got from that?
Well, I think necessity. We lived on a 150-acre farm. My dad was a farmer for many years before he became a contractor, and we worked hard, and a lot of the decisions you made on a daily basis were with common sense. Education was important in my family, but my mom and dad only went to the 8th grade, and that was pretty typical of that generation. But I was the first female in our family to go to college, and I had 2 other brothers that graduated from college, and one got his doctorate. So it was just what is normal, what is common, what is balanced. You didn't go to the extremes. You kind of stayed in the middle. And you could figure out things quite easily because you had to. You couldn't go to a store and buy. You had to make it up. You had to figure it out. And my mom and dad always encouraged me to, I had to buy my first car by myself. And you talk about the pain in our lives and the stories that we tell ourselves. When I was 16, I'd saved enough money to buy a car, and I said, Dad, would you come to town with me and help me buy a car? And he said, no, you can do that yourself. Was what I told myself about that is my dad didn't love me enough to go help me buy a car. That was not the truth. He trusted me so much that he didn't feel like he could help me with that. I'd do a better job than he did. So it's the stories that we tell ourselves often around some of our pain in our lives. Not saying that pain is not real, and we've all had traumas in our lives. We've had things that we wish could have been different, that we had no control over. But it's important to look at our story. What is it we're really telling ourselves? Because sometimes those stories are lies that you've built a whole lifetime around. And I just heard a quote recently that 1 out of every 6 human beings now does not speak to their family members.
Wow. I've not seen that statistic.
That is so sad to me because there's a story there somewhere of what happened in that family. And I don't believe with that high number that it was always justified. I know people get hurt and wounded in families, but there should be able to be repair. That's what we get to do, is work with the repair. Where there's ruptures, we get to work with repairs. And people who are rushing and staying busy, hiding out with whatever medicators work, drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, busyness, isolation, those are the people that really don't want to slow down, because if I slow down, I'm going to have to look at some of that. I'm going to have to pull that story out and say, is that really true? And that's one of the things that I love, helping people look at their stories through a little different lenses. Have you considered looking at it through the lens of a young part of you? Or have you considered looking at it through an adolescent's eyes? Or have you considered looking at it through your father's eyes or through your mother's eyes? What would it look like different? And that's where some of the repair starts to happen. It's like a painting that you have that you've always looked at it head on instead of looking at it from the side, and you don't see the whole picture.
You have in the last few years, you've been doing more individual and couples work, but the 10 years prior, it was fun to watch you in group because it's just a masterful thing to watch. And I've been professionally co-facilitated with you, I've witnessed you, and I've been in your groups. So I've kind of gotten the full gamut. And I know lately, last couple of years you've said, hey, I miss it. I miss group. I want to make sure I do it just to keep my skills sharp. But let's say you walk into a room with 10 strangers or 8 strangers, whatever the number, and they know they're coming into some type of counseling setting, and they know they're going to have to look at some of the hard parts of their stories. And some of them may be desperate to do that. Some of them may be scared to death to do that, and probably everywhere in between. Some of them probably don't want to be there. Some may be relieved to be there and out of whatever situation they came from. You got all these dynamics alive. What's in your mind? Like when you go in there, what do you think? Like, what's the first thing I'm going to do to be able to be effective here?
I'm going to be honest, because I believe that people are not used to being around honest people. They either lie to themselves or they lie to others. And I'm also going to try to find safety. What would help you feel safe in this group? Because safety is the bottom rung of every relationship. If we're not safe, we don't want to share anything. We don't want to let people in if it's not safe. And most of these people have been wounded in some area that they have really walled up and say, I can't ever let someone hurt me that way again. And the way I'm going to protect myself, I'm going to put that wall so high that people will get tired of trying to jump the wall, and they'll finally go away and leave me alone. And I tell people, I'm old. I often say that when I start group. I'm old. Time is short. I know you guys have paid really good money to be here. I want to help y'all jump in here, find some answers, and find some peace. And you can almost see everybody go, peace. That's a word I haven't heard often. And then I always bring a lot of fun into it. Even with their names. Tell me what your name means. Do you like it? What would you like to have been named? And so it kind of takes them out of thinking that somebody's going to tear them open and expose all their secrets to saying, you get to choose what happens in this group. You are the master of your life. I cannot make anything happen, but man, I'm going to be with you, and there's nothing you can share that would make me not accept you.
You, ultimately, I think if we could all think about that, I've thought about that a lot. I was like, from what I've learned as a skill set to being able to navigate a room full of ambivalence and challenges, or even an individual or a couple, first and foremost, it's how do we create a presence of psychological safety? Because without it, you can't build trust, and without trust, you can't get honesty. Honesty is one of the four corners of trust. But then how do you bridge into trust? And then how do you get curious enough? And I think what we probably agree on is, how do you get creative enough in the storytelling process to bring people into their own narrative without leading with the prefrontal and all the ways we can talk ourselves in and out of a mess. You are in a field. There's a lot of different modalities and change tools in our space. We both love everything that falls under this big umbrella of experiential, like making things come to life and getting creative in showing people versus telling people. The more standard approach to counseling, and there's nothing wrong with it because it's really well researched and it's got a lot of good data, and we blend a lot of that in too, is you sit and talk to each other. You have a cognitive exchange. And what you do really well, and what we try to do is, well, how do we take words and make them pictures? And how do we make pictures and turn them kinesthetic so that we can engage the entire part of your brain instead of the one that's trying to ration your way out of this situation? And I've seen you do it in a cool way, and I know you teach it all over the country. It's a field called Psychodrama, and it's got beautiful origins all the way back to Moreno, and I love the origin story of how it even came to life in the Greek theater, like why they did that in the beginning. And you got the highest credential you can get in that field. A ridiculous amount of hours it takes to get there, but it's teacher, educationer, practitioner, right? It's a TEP. And you're kind of known in that field. It's one of the lanes I was going to talk about, that one, and the disordered eating lane, which I want to get to in a minute. But why that field of study, and why those set of tools?
Well, when I ran a treatment center for many years for alcohol, drug, and eating disorders, and when I went there, I observed them doing psychodrama group, and I started asking questions, and they said, well, we don't know why we do this. This is just the way we were trained. And I said, something's off. And so I started looking for answers and found a trainer that we would fly in once a month from Washington, D.C. and New Jersey to Miami. So for 14 years, every month for 14 years, I went to Miami for a weekend of training, Friday night, all day, Saturday and Sunday. And what I realized is that psychodrama brings to life what is the thought process. It brings thoughts, and instead of talking about someone, you talk to them. So it somatically connects you with your body, And when you're having a conversation with someone that you're really angry at, and you put them in the chair, the body comes alive. The body starts to feel anger. The body says, and you are a rat. What you did was not right. And you start to see the anger come up. And you start to see the acceptance that, wow, I didn't know I had that much anger inside of me, because they'd say, I'm not angry. But once they get into it and feeling it, and then the release of it, letting it go, that's where people say, I feel like I'm 500 pounds lighter. You just got rid of some anger that you have pushed down for so many years. And anger pushed down over time can become, for a lot of people, depression. It's not always depression. There's different kinds of depression, but holding anger, which has tremendous velocity, keeping it pushed down takes energy. And that energy is what comes out as depression. So when people feel that, and it's like, wow, this really works. So it's about connecting the body, the emotions, the mind, the will. It's putting it all in one skill set. And the skill set is such that you can be as creative as you want to be, thinking of where the person is, what they need, when do they need it, who do they need to talk to, what do they need to let go of, what do they need to hang on to, what is it they need to open. And so often I move to the positives instead of just looking at the negative. What are some of your skill set that makes you special? And they'll say, I'm a loser. I can't hold a job. I can't do this. But you move into, let's talk to you about your creativity. Let's talk to you about your organizational skills. Let's talk to you about your leadership and how that shows up with people. And then people will start to say, wow, there's a bigger person in here than I ever thought. But they discover it, and it's in the body, so the body keeps the score, and it informs what's happening in the world for them. And that's when you just see people transition and change, and you're not doing anything. You're just leading and directing and being the container and keeping them safe in that process. But to watch people get the realization of, wow, I didn't know that was in there. I didn't know I was that angry. I didn't know I felt that shameful. And to see them reduce it, and why wouldn't you want to do this job? Just being able to see that. I mean, that's awesome.
When I did, as a client, before I got into the field, I did talk therapy for years, and I just couldn't really get traction. I'd have little moments where I was like, lots of ahas, but it just wasn't tracking. It was the same way that I struggled in traditional education, in which I credit my mom. She was brilliant. My mom was an elementary school teacher, but then she stopped teaching and started working, directly with us at home. But traditional teaching, I would come home and I would struggle, and she would make it a game. She'd make it experiential. She would put things here, use props, and say, tell me about this. And suddenly my brain would come alive. And I learned how, and I struggled a little bit academically until I got to grad school. And then I figured out I could do the same thing for myself. I could make this a little bit more of a curious adventure to knowledge instead of a traditional, I have to memorize this text and be able to, and 3.9, in grad school. And I was told all the way up, you're just not academically smart. You probably shouldn't even consider college. I told that about a guidance counselor one time. And it was my learning style. And then I get into needing mental health care and support. And all of a sudden, when people started meeting me visually where I was, I came alive. I started thinking, this is the most dreadful process of my life. I'm just going to sit here and go dig up all of my history, pour it out to you, examine it, look at it, and then in 55 minutes, I'll be back in my life. And until I had an opportunity to do an extended session, which we were, really important part of our history is pioneering some of those, and someone started showing me my story, and it got engaging and interactive, then it started to get fun. It started getting interesting. And because I don't know that I could have done this profession without that set of modalities, because otherwise I think it'd be too boring. to sit and talk all day long and listen all day long without some type of experience.
You're a kinesthetic learner.
Very much.
Yeah.
And I learned that early on. It's like, say something to me and it activates a third of my brain. Show me something, it activates 2/3. Make it kinesthetic, it activates all of it. And that's not just me, that's all of us.
Right.
That's why every single human, doesn't mean that everybody learns the way I learn. That's not what we're referencing. But it does mean every single one of us can go get lost in a really good screenplay. And there's a reason for that, because there's kinesthetic activity happening. And if you're going to go through the trouble of trying to change your life and change your story, why not make it interesting and curious?
And fun.
And fun. I found the recidivism goes down because it's not that it's a magic pill or people get better so much quicker, because it still requires maintenance like any other therapeutic change modality. But you don't see I'll see you 6 times a year or 15 times a year or once a month for the next 20 years. It's like, no, let's get right in there.
Well, the story that you've heard me share this story before about working in Uganda with the child soldiers is an example of this type of therapy. These young boys were abducted from Uganda, and some of them were sitting around the fires at night with their families, and the soldiers would just come take them. They went to Sudan, and they kept them for 3 or 4 years till the war was over. And these young boys started coming back. Well, I took a group over and was doing some trauma work with them. And we had been working on trauma all week, and the last day we do something called the precious moment. And I asked them, think of a moment that was a highlight in your life. And we're going to bring it, we're going to be the actors, and you're going to watch it, and we're going to perform it for you. It's like a little mini play, 3 sentences. And this young guy, he was about 19 now, he'd gotten married and had a baby, and he said, my precious moment was when my wife delivered our first baby, that little boy. He said, I won't ever forget, because he thought my life is over as a killer, as a soldier. So he's watching this, and they wanted me to be the wife. Well, there were a lot of, all of them from Uganda, and they wrapped me in the clothing, they wrapped my head, and they had this great big chair sitting there. Somebody had built this homemade chair. It was very wide. And I was sitting in the chair, and I said, okay, we're going to have a birthing chair. Well, they picked the young kid. He was about 16 that was in the workshop, and he was going to be the baby. Well, unbeknown to me, he got behind me, and I'm groaning, I'm giving birth. He crawls out between my legs, and he jumps up, and he says, I'm a boy. And then he realized what he said. He said, I'm just a boy.
Wow.
And I looked over there at Dad, and he was excited to see this come alive, but he realized, every young boy at that moment realized they weren't killers. They were just little boys that got abducted, and they were stuck in that little boy place. But that was through psychodrama when he stood up, and the tears were just running down his cheek, and he said, I'm just a boy. And I thought, wow, could have never got that thought across any other way.
Wow. What made you, or what makes you so passionate? You've talked to me a lot about Africa and how you have such a heart for the space. I know you've been over there a lot working with various NGOs, and we've done foundation nonprofit work through the Onsite Foundation over there. And you still, I mean, every year you'll hit me up and it's like, when are we going? We got some work to do there.
There's something about Africa. I don't understand it myself, except if you put it in perspective with my story, being raised in Arkansas, when there was segregation, brought up with all of the thoughts about blacks and whites, not realizing that I even had those thoughts till I left Arkansas. And then ending up in Africa, and there was such a love for the people. I went there after the genocide in 1994.
In Rwanda?
I went there in 1998.
Wow.
And worked with the 2 tribes.
In Rwanda?
In Rwanda, yeah. And I went several trips to Rwanda. In fact, my husband went with me on one trip. My brother raised money to build a center, and Paul built the center while my brother was out preaching and going into the backwoods. And that center is still there today.
Come on.
It's a huge center. And working with those two tribes, I won't ever forget we were doing reconciliation, because when Rwanda was considered a Christian nation, and the question was, how did 3 million people get slaughtered by each other in a Christian nation? And I interviewed the Minister of Justice there, and we asked him that question. He said, there's only one explanation. He said, it's evil. He said, you can't explain the way the slaughtering took place with machetes, but my heart just went out to these people. And there was one young man I remember when I was teaching, we were talking about forgiveness and grief. And I said, how many people do you need to forgive? He said, 22, just that quick. So he knew how many people he hated, because sometimes they would come into a person's home, and maybe the pastor's home, and they'd say to the pastor, if you will go kill these church members, we will let you and your family live. So that's what he did. So some of those members would escape, but they knew who was killing their family. So they walked around in the same community after all this killing. And I ended up with Hutus and Tutsis both in my group. And I remember doing a foot washing. And I said, this is an example of just humility and saying, maybe I was wrong, maybe I can forgive. And so this one young man, as he's washing the foot of a Hutu, and he was a Tutsi, he said, when I knelt down here, he said in the sharing, he said, you were my enemy. And I asked them when they finished washing their feet, will you just lay your hand on their knee and say a simple prayer for them? And he said, but as I laid my hand on you and I began to pray, you became my brother. So it's actions that we're changed. Because thoughts, we can just run them through, ruminate about them, think about them, yeah, I should. But it's in the doing. And when I asked that young man about the 22 people, I tied 22 people onto him. And I said, why don't you just go over there and sit down, because they don't know that they're tied to you. You're tying them every day.
Like literally
I tied 22 people.
22 people, tied them to this young man with like a roper.
Yeah. I put him on his arms, his legs, his back. And I said, won't you just go sit down? Well, he's pulling 22 people. And he was about this big. He was just Tootsie, tall, thin. And he said, this is how it feels every day in my life. And I said, that's what it feels like when you carry unforgiveness. It's heavy. It's anger of injustice, of what should have happened that didn't happen. And I said, so what do you need to do to write this? And he said, well, I need to untie him. I said, yeah, but you need to look at him and tell him how you feel. I'm angry at you. What you did was wrong. I'm untying you. I'm not letting you ride emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually on my back anymore. And to watch that young man untie 22 people and say, I'm done. You don't get a free ride anymore. And to watch what happened to him was amazing.
Why was it important for him to have that step of saying the unsaid, like, I'm angry at you?
Because that's the part of being honest. You need to acknowledge what happened to you. If you live in denial, in fact, in Sudan, I was working with a group of people that had lost everything twice. They lost their huts. Their pots and pans were stolen. I mean, that's the basics. They build a fire and cook the meal. And when I went in there to work with them, it was Ethiopia, sorry, not Sudan, Ethiopia, I was working with them. And we got to acknowledging the losses, and some of them had lost their husbands. A lot of women no longer had a husband. They were killed. And I said, can any of you raise your hand and acknowledge that you've had a loss? They couldn't do that. So what I did is I put some chairs up front, and I'd said, if you are missing someone in your life that is gone, they're no longer there, would you just come and touch the chair? So having them set back in the audience, nothing happened, but having them move and come touch the chair, it was amazing what started to happen. There were over 350 people in that room, and I had a line of chairs up front, and people were just holding the chair, weeping, because they had a way. It feels like to them there's a way I can do something, and it's releasing it.
What's happening in the brain and body when people get into movement and action like that?
Well, I think the brain is releasing everything that it's held on to, and the polyvagal nerve is being, they've been in anger, they've been in shutdown, they've been in punishment, punishing themselves really. And what happens is they start to release that, and their whole body begins to relax, and they begin to feel. Because if they allow themselves to feel, they're terrified. Will I be able to survive it? And we see the same thing here at Onsite. People will say, if I start to cry, I don't know if I can ever stop.
How many times I've heard that?
Or if I start to feel, I just feel like I'm opening up a river that just is going to drown me. And I'll say, we've never lost anybody here from weeping. We've never lost a client from grieving. They think they're going to be lost, but actually what it does is it brings healing to you. So I think it's about giving them permission, letting them have some symbolic way to touch something, to let the angst, the anger, the injustice, the fear, all of that just go right through their hand to that chair. I came up with that on the moment because I'm thinking there's got to be a way. I know that they're feeling these things because they're normal, they're human. And their grief is you can feel it when you walk beside them, but they can't let it out. But that day they were able to.
I would say for anybody out there moved by these stories that feels stuck in their own pain at the moment, if anybody's listening out there and you've talked and talked and talked, or maybe you hadn't said a word about something in your life that's creating significant adversity, don't be afraid to get creative with your own process. And we're not asking everybody, because obviously it takes a lot of training to be able to do a lot of what you do, and I've had a lot of that training too. So we're not asking everybody to try to play therapist, but you'd be surprised how much of a mirror and a healing agent you can be for the person next to you just by saying, hey, can we take a walk?
Yes.
And we could give you a lot about, walking, bilateral stimulation. It does a lot of stuff neurologically and biologically. It's one of the fastest ways we regulate people in treatment settings is if they are flooded, if they are near panic attack, if they are dissociating, walk and talk.
Yeah.
And that's a form of creating an experience. Golly, I could camp out there. So I hadn't heard some of those stories. I've heard some other stories that I'd be a puddle about some of the work that you've done in Africa and other parts of the world. We could spend a whole episode just talking about some of those. I hope you feel really proud of the impact that you've made there, and I understand why you have such a passion for it. You also married a legend, Paul, and you said just off to the side, while we were doing this, Paul built this. And I was like, of course Paul did that.
Yes.
I was in a bind with one of my endeavors several years ago. I can't remember how many years ago. But I remember, I was running Onsite and I had something going in California and something going over here. But we really had this need to create a longer term opportunity for people to reconcile and deal with their trauma and mental health. And most of the places out there were super clinical and felt like a hospital, and I just didn't love the experience. It wasn't catching people. And so created that, I think 11, 12 years ago. And about halfway through, as it goes in running these endeavors, you live and die by the teams that you're able to put around the culture that you build. A lot of people want to tout their clinical model, and here's what makes us special, and here's what makes us great. And I'm always, first question is like, show me who's in the group room. Talk to me about your primaries. How are they? How long have they been there? Do they like what they do? Well, we went through a season, inevitably, there's a lot of turnover in our space where we lost our leadership, and I had nobody there at Milestones to run things. And I remember calling you out of desperation. I was like, help, what do I do here? And I said, I wish I could just heliport you here, because I know you've run a lot of treatment centers. You've been around the field for a long time on the administrative side and on the clinical side, which I think is very unique to have both sides of your brain rolling like that. But you said, well, hold on, I'll call you back in a minute. And you talked to Paul. You said, when do you need us there? And I said, us? And you said, well, yeah, if I'm coming there, I'm bringing Paul with me.
And our dog.
And you guys literally came and had an RV on property and stepped in a temporary leadership role there. And I got to tell you now, I don't even know the timeline, but 7 years later, that place is rocking. I mean, we are doing some amazing work there. We have an incredible team. We got great, you know who runs it. We got great leadership. Running one of those is a real art form, and it's with a lot of science blended in, and it's tough to get. You can't get it right all the time because you're dealing with the human condition and a very broken part of the human condition in many cases. But for the most part, I'm really proud of everything we're doing there, and I think a lot of that has to do with you jumping in there with a lot of constant experience.
Well, Miles, serving is how we build character, and there are many ways to serve, and I constantly look in my own life and say, is there other areas that I need to be serving in? Because when we serve, it's not about us. We're not promoting ourselves. And good comes out of that.
Speaking of serving, Paul didn't just tag along. While we're up there in the group room trying to deal with what we thought was all of our sophisticated problems, he jumps onto the maintenance team and the grounds team. And just every time I saw the guy, he was doing something good, blowing the parking lot off, checking on this, checking on that. But here's what I love more than anything. He was kind of a secret Jedi, because he was not seen, those of us that had a name tag, you could tell we were somewhat official. We were in some kind of clinical role and probably intimidating some people. And he's the groundskeeper. But the guy has so much wisdom that people were talking to him. Staff were talking to him. I've still got stories where he poured into staff during his time there. So talk to me about how important that's been for you and why you feel it might be important in choosing our mate or investing in our core relationships, and in this case, our marriage, what that's been like for you and maybe how it's helped you sustain this career.
I could never do what I do without his accepting of who I am. He often, we just are celebrated 53 years of marriage last week. And he jokingly said, we've only lived together 6 weeks. He said, Mary travels a lot. But he's always said that he knew he married a butterfly and that I needed space. And he has always honored, go do what you do. He said, I will support you. He's been retired now for about 10 years. I will keep the house up, take care of the dog. I'll take you to the airport, pick you up. And it's that acceptance that allows me to be able to do this, that he's not jealous, he's not demanding. And again, we've walked through some hard places in our relationship over the years, and we've worked on them. And I tell people, you don't give up working on a relationship, because to be at an age as you get older where you have the companionship, the understanding, the love, the acceptance, it is worth all of the effort you put into it. And there are no perfect relationships. And we all are human. We're going to say things and do things. And sometimes I get so angry at him that I'll just call him a name, and he'll just laugh at me and say, you married me. And I say, yes, I did. And sense of humor is tremendously effective in a relationship.
Disarming.
And you cannot let it go. And you cannot take each other for granted. Because we always need to be told that we're loved. We need space. We need time. We need attention. We need passion. And when I say passion, I don't mean just sexual passion. I mean passion for life. And this is what I see happening as older people are losing their passion. And then they turn to body. Everything's about the body. What ate, what hurts, what needs to be fixed. But you put passion back in your life, and you know what? You're not so focused on what the body is doing. You're aware of it, but it doesn't demand that you give into it and become really immobilized psychologically, spiritually, in every area. I see so many of my friends keep saying, we want you to retire. I said, guys, I'm not going to retire and live the way y'all are living. Even if I did retire, I'd be probably giving away my time somewhere here at the mental health center or somewhere. I'd be doing something, but I would not be sitting home watching soap operas and going to lunch every day.
I had a friend of mine in the field a long time ago tell me he was considering retirement, and he said, the way I've learned to define retirement is to do what I want to do when I want to do it with the people I want to do it with.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and he said, I'm kind of doing that in my job right now.
Yeah.
And so why would I stop it? And I was like, wow, that's good. Well, I just wanted to give a shout out to Paul because Paul, you're a man of few words, but you make your words count. And Mary, you're one of the biggest blessings of my life in so many ways. You've changed my life. You're a friend. You pray for me every day. I hope you still do.
I do.
Nobody's ever done that for me. And you've been doing that a long time. You tell me about it twice a year. You're like, sometimes you'll call me. And what I take from that is extreme belief in me, even the parts that I still struggle to believe in. And I really value it. And I tell you that, but I don't know that I've told Paul yet how much I value him being an anchor for you and being an anchor for us for a short period of time. I thought about him recently because you were over at Onsite doing some work and got sick. And I don't really get, you and I talk once a week. I don't get calls from Paul, but I got a call from Paul immediately. And I just love that he called me because most people don't. They call the people that they think can do something about it, and they assume I'm too busy. And he was like, no, I'm calling you. Mary needs you. And I was like, bam, that's the kind of husband I want to grow up to be. So I just love Paul, and I want to give him Paul a hats off. I want to talk for a minute about this. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Time-wise, good. Still got energy. You are pretty known, but you have, like in many spaces, you have not tried to make yourself known. You're just really effective and efficient. You spend a lot of time specifically in this lane. And whenever I have someone that I'm coaching or working with that is struggling with this particular issue, I always call you in as kind of a clinical specialist. And that's people who struggle with disordered eating, body image issues, weight issues, or the whole variety of eating disorders. And tell me a little bit about why you felt it was important. I know you've run eating disorder programs. You've created curriculum for eating disorders programs. I've joined with you and we've co-counseled people going through significant transformations and journeys. But why has that been important for you?
Well, when I started working at the treatment center, I realized that I needed to learn a lot more about eating disorders because they're not like any other addictive process. And a lot of people assume that they are. So I become certified, and it took me a few years to get that certification through the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. And so many people struggle around food and food as a medicator, and different parts of the country see food differently. Food can be something that people use and they don't see it as an addictive process. But food is the one addiction we can get to the earliest in our lives. So it starts for some people when they're 3 or 4 or 5 years of age. It's not unusual to see 6-year-old anorexics now. I do a lot of supervision for people that are getting certified, and just talking to a therapist yesterday, her youngest client is 6 years old, and working with the family, working with the psychiatrist, working with the dietitians, because food has become so crucial that it makes them feel like if I can get this food or if I cannot eat this food, I'm okay. And so there are many methods that people use with food to purge. They can use exercise, they can vomit, they can
restrict.
And we have a whole generation now that's in restricting. You and I were doing a group out in California several years back, and I remember we were working with a bunch of young actresses, and they were all restricting to the point that they were hungry. And I remember one night that they made fried chicken. I think you had left already, but the chef made fried chicken. And watching those girls eat, it's the first time they'd been away from their managers and there was nobody to observe. They ate plates of fried chicken. They had not had fried chicken in years because they were restricting, because they have to be a certain weight, look a certain way, and they're always hungry. And it's really sad in our world that we have become so outwardly focused and so looking at the body, what size it is, what shape it is, and shaming people who have bodies that are not the normal size. So people walk around in such shame and just humiliated about who they are in their bodies, and when a lot of times they can't change it. They can't fix it because there are a lot of metabolic, there are genetics, but we also know that genetics can be altered with good, balanced boundaries. And a lot of people say, well, this is just, this runs in our family. It may, but there are things you can do about it. You can start exercising. You can, instead of eating 8 meals a day, you can learn to eat 3 meals a day. So there are things that people can do, and as the anxiety in our world builds, people are looking for the closest thing. What is it that I can get to that will calm my body and soothe my body? And what I find is what people are binging on tells you a lot about what's going on with them. If they binge on sweets, creamy, sweet, ice cream, cakes, pies, they're looking for solace. They're looking for comfort. I just feel like there's nobody here for me. So I'm looking to a pie, a cheesecake, ice cream to make me feel okay. So when you move that into action and you actually put a carton of ice cream in front of them and say, how on earth can that ice cream meet the need of the human heart? It's simply a shortened version of just give it to me and it soothes me. I feel better for the moment. But then when they purge to get rid of it, and I will never forget one time I was working with a client and we had just left group and she said, I'm going to throw up. And I said, you're not going to do it by yourself this time. I'm going in the bathroom with you and I'm going to hold your head. And as she threw up in that toilet, I said, how does it feel to be bowed down in front of a porcelain god? Because this toilet is going to tell you if you're okay if you threw up enough. So you've made it a god. And I said to her, this is so shaming for you. I know that. I know it's shaming to have me in here with you. But I said, if you could allow the contents that you just threw in that toilet to speak, what would they say? And she looked at me and she said, it was about my father's incesting me.
Wow.
And they would say, you need to stop. You're hurting me. I want you to be my father, not my abuser. that was the day that her life changed. I said, you don't have to do this alone. This is not a one-person battle. You need a team to fight eating disorders, because you got to have a balance of food, nutrition, health, sleep, friends, get out of isolation. And so you need a team to work, and most people love isolation because in isolation you can control everything. And there's a lot of fear. So they go to control, because if I'm in control, I feel safe. I said, no, it's a false sense of safety. It's not real safety, because nobody can feel safe when they're purging in a toilet. You don't feel safe then. You feel humiliated. And there are just so many aspects of it. It's about giving people back their dignity and putting food back where it belongs. It nurtures you enough to be able to give and connect in relationships. That's the purpose of food. Not to take place of the relationship, but to nurture you enough so you have energy.
I remember a client that you and I worked with that, in this case, it was compulsive overeating, and they really struggled. I mean, it's whip smart, had all the tools and all the knowledge, but really struggled to just get over the hump. And we continued to chronically relapse, which is really common, with all eating disorders and really all addictive processes. It's incredibly common. People give relapse such a bad rate, but it's actually a natural stage of change.
Yes.
It can be a very dangerous one for some people, and that's why we're cautious of it and try to build relapse prevention plans around it. But in this case, we ultimately got to the narrative, and I won't go into the long form about how we got there. I'll never forget it because it's very visual, and I remember it's an experiential process that ultimately they decided that I don't think I deserve to be healthy.
Right.
Okay, well, tell me about healthy. What does healthy mean to you? Healthy to me would be whole. There's no part of me in the mistakes I've made in the history that I've lived that deserves to be whole. I've just made too many mistakes. And so we went into doing that work. We did some shame reduction work, and we did some other things. And ultimately what I think flipped the narrative for this client and allowed them to put one foot in front of the other and start making different and better decisions is when they believed they deserved to be healthy.
Yes.
And they started to like the part of them that they had loathed for so many years and had been covered in shame, that they started slowly making better decisions. And it's a long process, but I saw it come up again where they've had a tremendous amount of success, very visible success. And yet the awards around this person's profession should be the highlight, because they've done all this work to be on the biggest stage and be awarded the biggest award for their accomplishments, for their vocation. An extreme dread leading up to it. Don't want to go, don't want to be there, hate these, they're awful, don't want to. And I don't know why it took me 10, 15 award shows before I got all the way back to where you and I started and said, do you think you belong here? No. Do you think you deserve to be in this room? Are you kidding? Look where I came from. It's a complete ridiculous luck that I'm here. I don't deserve to be here. I'm taking up somebody's seat. Okay, well, bam. Let's get the mirror out and talk to that 10-year-old kid.
Right.
And let's figure out how we get him a seat at the table. And immediately, boom, all right, I'm going to show up different in this space. I don't care if I win. I don't care about the stress of giving the perfect speech. I don't even care if I'm nominated. I have earned a seat at this space. So I would say to anybody out there, and I know we didn't get to spend a lot of time on this, at some point I think I'd love to get you back to talk a little bit more about it, the specifics about it and the recovery of it. And because I think it's a condition that is so much bigger and more widespread than any of us even know. Because there's disordered eating, which is one end of the spectrum, but there's body image issues and insecurity about who we are, how we show up in the world, comparison, everything we see, all the impressions every day about how we're supposed to look, that I think lives within most humans. I think there's some that probably might be immune to it, but I think for the most part, everybody has navigated that narrative a little bit. But often
what we look for is what's the latest fad, the quickest fix, the newest shot that we can take to try. And I'm not judging you that. I think for some people, medical innovation is wildly important, and it's helping people get a jump start and helping. But I know this, that unless we can change the mindset,
Yes.
that no matter how many surgeries or shots or whatever we might be able to utilize, it will still be, it would be difficult to achieve peace.
Well, the body dysmorphic disorder, which is the hating of the body, it takes about a year. If a person loses a lot of weight, it takes a year for the mind to accept that the body is smaller. It will still want to take up the space that maybe they were when they were 400, 500 pounds, and they don't realize my body's changed. So the brain does not get on board with where the body is, and that's why you got to slow down and work in a way where they're connected to their bodies. They feel what's going on in their bodies, and that's why a lot of these people have major medical issues and they're not aware of them, because they're not connected to their body. They don't feel a lot of pain because they don't connect. So we often in treatment, when somebody would get to their goal weight and we'd send them to a doctor for a good checkup, they'd find all kinds of medical stuff. And the doctor would say, "Don't you feel any pain? Haven't you felt some of this?" "No, nothing." So it's about connecting, and that's the part that is really the hardest for them.
The one of my favorite gifts that you have is when you just speak into people. You get to do it professionally all the time, but you also do it personally all the time, and it almost feels like when you do it. Oh, it's all right. When you do it, and I feel like if I've learned anything from you, and if I have a natural calling or gift, I'm still developing that. It's just being able to see in somebody what they can't necessarily see in themselves, be able to call it out in a way and communicate it in a way that there's a chance it'll land. I love when you do that. You do that with me. You do it with a lot of people. There's a creative tool that we use in therapeutic sessions called doubling, which is one of the ways to speak into somebody almost through them, basically using their own words. You use those creatively all the time, even when you don't do it formally. You don't even call it doubling, but I know you're doubling.
Yeah.
We hadn't seen each other in a little while. We don't talk as much as we used to. My life's been crazy busy the last couple of years. Used to, we had more consistent check-ins. I came in today and we met for lunch. We were supposed to have an hour for lunch prior to our conversation. That turned into 30 minutes because I was dealing with some stuff on the phone and drama and blah, blah. So I came in a little hot. And you were super thoughtful. We caught up, small talk for a minute. And you finished half of your meal, and then you got up and came over and sat beside me. And that wasn't odd to me because we know each other. And I said to you, "Hey, you want me to move your plate over here? You get no closer so we can just better proximity." And you didn't say, "I came over here because I thought my presence might be more effective in better proximity to you." I think you said, "Yeah, we can hear better." And that may have been part of it, but I've seen you do it too many times. So I know why you came over there, because you could feel there was something happening in me that I wasn't saying. And I didn't necessarily have the time to say it then, but so I'm going to put myself out here because I trust you and in front of all these people. But if you were to double for me then, or if you were to double for me now, about where I am in life, what I'm trying to tackle professionally, the challenges that I have naturally, personally, and all the other things I'm going on, obviously without airing too much of my laundry, which I'm happy to do it, but how might you double me?
I would say life is coming at me fast and furious, and my energy's low, and I don't have the answers. And I want to be a really good man and a good husband. And I'm not sure that I'm checking all the boxes.
You check that one. Yeah. So the value of that, And we won't necessarily go with it right now because of timing. But every word you said really checks out for me. It fits for me right now. But even if it didn't, like if you would have missed the mark, that would have given me the opportunity to clarify and say, you know what, maybe that part, but probably not that part.
Yeah.
I think so many of us get stuck when we're in stress and we lose our words. And I've always had a cyclical way of thinking, and you know me, I can bounce around a thought for days. It's part of my gift and part of my burden. But I do often set an unrealistic set of expectations about how I move in the world. Expectations of which I'll probably never get to meet. They're helpful because they drive me towards goals, and I've been able to find some success with them. I've been able to deploy grace in failure, and I'm realizing that's part of the gig too. But I do give myself a hard time. And I think today when I came in, I was giving myself a hard time. Mm-hmm. And now, if we did a case study, not that I don't deserve it, but if we did a case study on exactly what I've been navigating the last 2-3 weeks, anybody'd be like, yeah, it seems like pretty hard circumstances. I get it. Going through something, it's totally okay. What I think I'll do after hearing that, and there's some other things if we had time we'd do more of, but I think I'm going to walk out of here and give myself a little bit more grace.
Good. Because that's what we all struggle with doing, is having grace for ourselves. We give it away to other people, but when it comes to us, we just expect more. Mm. And Miles, what I've always admired about you is you're such a visionary. Mm. I laugh at you, and some of the ideas that you have are just absolutely hilarious. Like, I think we should just be making cowboy hats and selling them in the mercantile. And thought, yeah, Miles, that's a good idea. When are you going to do that? At 2 a.m. in the morning, you know? But also, what I appreciate, that you're a mentor to me in legacy. Because I think legacy is the now. It's what we're doing now. You're building your legacy, but I also look into you to help me finish well. Because you see the big picture, and not a lot of people see the big picture. We can get so pigeonholed over here in this little tiny piece of the map that we don't see where it fits in. And I think that's why you're such a success, that you see the bigger picture. And I don't always see the bigger picture, because I'm down here looking at how do we heal this heart, or how do we help this person move to where they are more comfortable in their skin and in their life, and more productive, and find their own journey, find their own lane. I just believe if everybody could get in their lane, what a wonderful world it would be. But we're all searching and moving in and out of each other's lanes, controlling and fixing and wanting and desiring and judging, when really if we just wake up and say, Lord, let me stick to where you've given me today, and help me to keep vigilant and purposeful, and have a little fun in here. Don't forget the fun, because that's when we can laugh at ourselves. And sometimes I laugh and I say, I can't believe I really just said that. They really should lock me up sometimes for some of the things I say to clients.
I was trying to think. There's a couple really funny stories that happened out at Onsite. I don't even know if we can tell them. Can we?
Probably can.
Is there what would be one of the funniest ones? You remember which one?
The narcissist that told me to shut up.
Okay, yeah, tell that one.
I was working with a person that we were trying to really get him into the softer part of his inner child, and he was doing very well. I said, you're doing a great job. And he wheeled around and said, I need the teacher to shut up. I mean, it was really mean. And him and his wife were sitting there, and for some reason it struck me as funny. I just thought it was funny. And I said, I am so sorry, I can't shut up. Why not? I said, well, you just paid too much damn money for this workshop. And I want to make sure you get your money's worth. And then he kind of looked at me and he said, I'm pretty bad, aren't I? I said, you're right up there. And his wife is over there like, bless her heart, she was barely saying anything. And she was like, yep, he is. We got through the time, but I remember telling you what I'd done, and you said, you didn't do that. I said, I did. I did it. It just came out, and I said, we got on through the week. He didn't fire me. So, but sometimes truth comes in different stories, but sense of humor sometimes helps it get over there. So,
yeah. Well, I think I was gonna follow up with the doubling for me, to warm you up for doubling for the world right now. And in some ways, maybe I think you did, because you just naturally do, but you went into the narrative of being in each other's lane and why that's important. And I do want to ask you this part, because I think you integrate it and carry it in such a prideful, effective way, unapologetic, but respectful, because you don't want to run people off with something that you know is so core to your being and your belief system, but to other people maybe not, and maybe there's some history with them, and that's your faith, the way you live your faith, the way you talk about your faith. How is it, and how has it been important to you to be able to stay in your lane and continue to reclaim peace day after day, and to stay in resilience?
Well, I'm not the change agent.
Pressure off.
Yeah, I can't fix anybody. Years ago, I was working at a hospital in Maine, and was working with Dr. Richard Hornberger, who wrote the book MASH. That was his story of his time in service. And he was doing a pneumonectomy, and I wanted to watch him. And he said, come on in, you can stand at the head of the operating table. And at the end of it, he took a half a lung out, sewed the guy back up, and he was fine. And I said, Dr. Hornberger, you're quite the healer. He said, no, Mary, I'm not. He said, we take out, we install, we sew them up, and then the healing takes place. And he said, we don't have anything to do with that. And I got to thinking, well, that's kind of like me. We bring skills, we spend time, we have formats that we use or may not use. We listen, we contain, we weep with at times. We do a lot of things, but ultimately we can't heal. That is a process that's between them and the God of their understanding. And so I don't feel the pressure to make anything happen, because I can't. If I show up, and what research tells us, the most healing part of a therapeutic relationship is the relationship you have with the client.
Outpaces every model you could ever use.
Yes, that it's the connection. If I can connect with them, and sometimes you've heard another story of a client I was having trouble connecting with because they were so out of reality. I took them to Walmart.
Oh, yeah. That's a great story, too. I was like, well, you did what?
I know. Everybody said, I did what? Well, I was trying to connect him that the whole world shops at Walmart. This is life. This is American life.
I don't think he'd ever stepped foot in one, right?
He'd never been in one.
Yeah.
He thought it was a place that homeless people shopped. But he left that day laughing, and he said, that was really fun.
Yeah, made a great connection in there. I remember that.
Yeah. And the neat thing is I had not been able to really connect with him the way I wanted to. And when he got ready to leave, he come running over and almost knocked me over, hugging me. And he whispered in my ear, he said, you may have saved my life. I said, I hope so. And I said, enjoy Walmart.
I think he'll be back.
Because I told him, go home and be with your children, be with your wife, enjoy what you have that's been blessed upon you. And it's not about what you have, it's the relationships.
Cool.
So what I would say if I'm doubling for the world right now, turn the news off. Research has proven that any more than 15 minutes of news creates anxiety, resentment, and bitterness. And look around you at your family. Find out, get inquisitive, get curious. Wonder what my wife's thinking. I wonder what my wife would like to do. I wonder what my kids are thinking. I wonder what they need. What would they like to do with me if you're a dad or a mom? But just slow down and start saying, how can I take care of myself? Or what is it I need? And often I love to be with couples and have fun. In a couple of weeks, I'm going on a cruise with 5 other couples, Paul and I. I do that about every 6 months. I have more fun. We dance, we do karaoke, which is horrible. We play games. We just enjoy. And you've got to be able to have fun. Life is short. It is so short. And everybody is so aware, like time is just moving so quickly. I tell people, slow down. Turn the television off. Play a game with your family. When my family was there, we played dominoes. We played cards. We laughed. We cut up every night till 11 o'clock at night. There's something that is so exhilarating about sitting across the table and laughing and joking, eating, just sharing fun. And people don't do that anymore. They don't eat together. They don't laugh together. Everybody's watching some sort of technology. So I would encourage people, be kind. Just be kind to yourself and go do something really, really out of the box for you and see what happens. Just do an experiment. Do something so absolutely crazy and say, how did that make me feel? I guarantee you're going to feel excitement. And for some people, that's the first time they felt excited in a long time, because people have lost their passion and they don't know how to get it back. And it's not through Viagra.
There's the quote of the day right there. Sarah, what you got?
You brought up legacy before.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know what you hope your legacy is.
What my legacy is?
Mm-hmm.
I think my legacy is she cared. And Miles has helped me. I told him this were my exact words, because they often, when someone's deceased here, they plant a tree. And I said, Miles, I don't want a friggin' tree. Because trees die and they get knocked down and they lose their limbs. I want a living memorial. I want something that's alive. And from that, Miles came up with the pastor's retreat, which I've always been concerned with pastors needing places where they can go and do their own healing, because they carry the burdens of the world. And legacy for me is I live my legacy every day. It's not something in the future. It is what I'm doing every day. And we're all doing that. We're all right now leaving a legacy, even though you may not realize it. People are going to look back and say, I remember when Miles did this, and Miles started this, or Miles, that's his legacy. So legacy is the footprints that you've left on people's hearts would be what my legacy is.
We've had a lot of conversation. I want to say something about the pastor's retreat, because this would be a good time to kind of plug it and share it for those that might could use it, this is really going to be, this is Mary's program. I think we're in our 3rd year of it. Let's see, we're our 3rd one or our 4th one?
Second
one. We did one?
Well, we did one that was not with Onsite. The one for Onsite. This will be our 2nd one.
Okay, great. Oh, you know what? It was with that other group we were working with. Yeah. So this is our 2nd annual. I forget. We've worked with pastors a long time, but this is the 2nd. But basically what we're doing is through the Onsite Foundation, and it's going to be endowed forever. If I have to endow myself, Mary's program is going to live on forever. And I think a lot of people want to get behind it anyway, because basically what we're doing is taking pastors who, it's another profession that we tend not to see. Or we tend just to see that they stand on stages and they say meaningful things about their body of knowledge and try to pour into us. But what you don't see are the hospital visits and all the other things that come with it. And you consume a lot. And I know you have a heart for pastors. And so we take upwards of 50 to 60 pastors. It's completely scholarshiped. And this is just what we're doing now. I think it's going to even grow, because we saw how effective the first one was. And we take them through a 5-day Uber curated program and kind of bring them the best. And you and me and some other great people we respect sat around a table and kind of built it and put it together. And it was, the results we got out of the first one was really remarkable. And so I'm excited to see where that continues to go and how it will continue to grow. But if you are a pastor or you have a pastor that you think could use an immersive therapeutic experience with Mary and some other friends that are just so good at pouring into people, you can go to the Onsite Foundation and look at that program and reach out to our team. And it's completely free. You just got to get yourself to either California or Tennessee, where we end up hosting the next one. We might host one in Georgia, I think, coming up too. Then check that out. We've talked about legacy a lot. We'll continue to talk about legacy, and I never will forget when we arrived at that we're actually living our legacy now, which you just poignantly said. But I want to say to you that I felt the pressure, when you came to me years ago and said, hey, as a friend, you've called me a mentor for years. Would you be able to help mentor me a little bit in this last chapter? And I really want to end well, and I want to make sure what I do counts. And and that's part of the reason why we steered you towards some of the people you're influencing now, which is really cool, because you spent week after week, 50 weeks a year for the last several years working with highly influential people with big platforms and part of that goal was change. I know putting you in a room with somebody is going to change their heart in a good way. I know it's going to put their feet on the ground in a really good way, spiritually and emotionally. It's just a true gift. And I thought, if you can do it with these people who are going to be in front of 20,000 people a night, 200 days a year, or in some cases even more than that if they're selling stadiums, whatever it might be, then imagine the ripple. So I would say to you now, after 3 or 4 years of working with that population, imagine the ripple. I stood at the Grammys 2 weeks ago, and I watched not 1, not 2, not even 3, but I think 5 recipients and nominees get up and share a testimony about their biggest life accomplishment for their vocation at that time. And in my mind, I had this beautiful pride that I knew Mary B had something to do with that. And I've watched, and I even tell you're not impressed by it. You could care less, but I'll be like, Mary, you realize your name got dropped on one of the biggest podcasts in the world last week. And you're like, who? What? I don't know. And that's what's been beautiful about it, is half the people I put you in front of, you don't even know who they are and what they've done. You trust me enough to say they must be doing something pretty good and pretty influential if you want me to spend some time with them, and you do. We'll continue to build legacy together, but I want you to say yours is built, baked, cemented. You know why? Because I'm not done yet. And who knows? The way you go and your energy may outlive me. But I'm just getting started. And I'm getting started primarily because a big part of your foundation is what inspires me every day to put one foot in front of the other and take the big picture that God has granted me and go try to help change, grow, and heal people and solve some of the challenges that humanity really suffers. And I know you spent a lifetime committed to it. I said in the intro, you're a North Star for me, and you always will be. And I just want to thank you. This was needed. It was fun. All my time with you is always needed and fun. I think other people will agree, those of you that are listening, but selfishly, this might be my favorite podcast because I got to spend time with somebody I deeply admire. And I just appreciate you. I love you. I hope we get to do this for a lot longer.
Thank you, Miles. It's been a joy to be. I always love collaborating with you. I never know what's going to come up.
Well, let's go do some more of it.
Sounds good.
Before we go, if any of this resonated with you, chances are someone you care about might could use this as well. So pass it on and remind them that they're not the only one trying to figure this out. This is how Human School grows. If you could help us by subscribing and following along, we will notify you when our next episode is ready. I'm Miles Adcox, and I'll see you next week.